So this lesson is about blood vessels and their functions. So we should be able to describe the structures of arteries, arterioles and veins, look at how is the structure of each related to its function, and describe the structure of capillaries and explain how it is related to their function. So in larger organisms, the materials are transported around by blood. And to allow rapid transport of blood and to control the flow of blood, it is kept inside blood vessels. So you've got arteries, capillaries, and veins. But you've also got arterioles in between the arteries and the capillaries. So just a bit of general information about blood vessels. So arteries carry blood away from the heart. Arteries away from the heart into arterioles. Arterioles are smaller than arteries, and what their job is to control the flow of blood into the capillaries to kind of slow it down so it doesn't burst the capillaries. Capillaries are tiny vessels which link the arterioles to veins, and their job is for exchange of oxygen and nutrients and to get back the waste from the cells. And then you've got veins which carry blood from capillaries into the heart. So veins into the heart. So veins carry blood from capillaries into the heart. So arteries, arterioles and veins have the same basic layered structure. It's just a percentage of each that changes. So there is the tough outer layer which can resist pressure changes, this one in grey. You've got the muscle layer, which is this one in orange, which can contract and control the flow of blood. You've got the elastic layer, which is the one in yellow, which helps maintain blood pressure by stretching and springing or recoiling back. Then there is the thin inner lining, or the endothelium. If it's anything to do with the blood, it's called endothelium. So the inner lining is smooth and it prevents friction, and it's very thin, so it allows diffusion in the capillaries. And then the centre bit that the blood flows through is called the lumen, which is the white bit here. So the arteries, veins and arterioles all have these layers, but the only thing that changes is the proportions of each. So arterioles differ from arteries because they're smaller in diameter, and their muscle layer is relatively thick in comparison to arteries. So looking at arteries now, how is the artery structure related to its function? Well, the function is to transport blood rapidly under high pressure from the heart to the tissues. So because of that, the muscle layer is very thick. Smaller arteries can be constricted or dilated to control the volume of blood passing through. They have a very thick elastic layer compared to veins, which is important because the blood pressure is very high. It's got to be kept high in order to reach all the extremities, so like the legs, the arms, the fingers, toes, etc. And the elastic wall stretches at each beat of the heart, so systole, and springs back and recoils when the heart relaxes. That's called diastole. So the stretch and recoil helps to maintain the high pressure, and it also smooths pressure surges. So the overall thickness of the wall is large, and it resists the vessel from bursting. And another thing is quite obvious really, but arteries have no valves except from the semilunar ones when they're leaving the heart. And the reason it doesn't need valves is because the blood is under constant high pressure and doesn't flow backwards. Because it's under high pressure, it's not going to flow backwards. So that's the arteries. Now, arterioles, how is their structure related to their function? Well, first of all, their job is to carry blood under lower pressure than arteries to capillaries. and the job is to control the flow of blood between the two. So it's to control the flow of blood between the arteries and the capillaries. So the muscle layer is relatively thicker than in the arteries because they have to contract the muscle to constrict the lumen to resist the flow of blood, to slow the flow of blood and control the movement of blood into the capillaries that supply tissues with blood, because we don't want the capillaries to burst. The elastic layer is relatively thinner than arteries because the blood pressure is slightly lower once it reaches the arterioles. Okay, now veins, how vein structure relates to their function. Well, veins, their function is to transport blood slowly under low pressure from the tissues, from the capillaries to the heart. So their muscle layer is thin compared to arteries because they carry blood away from tissues, and the elastic layer is thin because it's such low pressure that it won't cause them to burst or create a recoil because the pressure is very low now. So the overall thickness of the wall is small because the pressure is so low that it's not going to risk it bursting. And it also allows the veins to be flattened, squeezing of muscles to flatten the veins to help with the flow of blood. Veins also have valves so that the blood doesn't flow backwards. Oh, I've said this before. When body muscles contract, veins are compressed, pressurizing the blood within them, and the valves ensure that the pressure directs the blood in one direction towards the heart, prevents backflow, and the muscles squeeze the veins flat to help it squeeze the blood back up against gravity. So now capillary structure related to function. So obviously the capillary function is to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide and glucose and the waste back. So it's to exchange all those between the blood and the cells. So the flow of blood is significantly slower so that there's more time to exchange materials. So the walls only have just the lining layer. So it's very thin so that there's a short diffusion pathway. So there's rapid diffusion from blood to cells. So the lining layer is called the endothelium. So that's all the capillaries have, is just the endothelium. So very thin, short diffusion pathway, rapid diffusion from the blood to the cells. There is lots of them, so they're numerous and they're highly branched, which creates a large surface area for faster diffusion. They have a narrow diameter so that they can permeate tissues and so that the diffusion distance from any cell is small. They have a narrow lumen, so actually the red blood cells are squeezed flat against the sides, which means that it brings them closer to the tissue cells which they supply oxygen to, so there's a short diffusion pathway. They also have microscopic spaces between the lining of the endothelial cells, which allows white blood cells to escape to deal with infection. So the white blood cells will escape from the blood into the tissue to allow it to deal with any infection or some infections. And then the final journey of the material is made by tissue fluid. And that is the end of the structure and function of blood vessels.